Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Ravenbane. We've done a couple of lore and speculation videos recently, and I'm extremely excited for today's topic. In the past couple of episodes, we have gone over some of the important happenings throughout the history of Hallownest, all occurring before the events of the game Hollow Knight. After completing a couple of these videos, I hope you understand the history of the Kingdom of Hallownest better, and the game makes a bit more sense. There's probably tons of things I'm still missing and probably many more stories to tell, but enough with the talk. Now, it's time for today's topic. The Collector. This episode is based on a theory I read by mola, molasses, an incredibly highly regarded and amazing member of the Hollow Knight lore community. I stumbled upon this article while reading on the Void for another video that will be absolutely massive. It's on the Void in Ancient Civilization, by the way, and it's going to be incredible. I read through it, and I thought it was tremendous. It helps piece together the story of Hallownest. So, today, I'll try and give Molasses' theory a lot of light and share it with you as well as possibly. Said I was going to stop talking, and now I finally will. Everyone watching this video has most likely played and completed the Metroidvania Hollow Knight. This game is amazing if you haven't, and I highly recommend it, so go play it. Anyways, probably 3/5 of the way through the game, you went under the King's Station and you heard a very creepy laughing. Later on, you found a strange key labeled the Love Key in the Queen's Gardens, and either immediately knew what to do with it or had no possible ideas what it led to. Eventually, you strutted into the Tower of Love and saw these glass jars containing various creatures, fought a very strange boss, saw a weird grub painting, got a map, left and went, what just happened? With no possible ideas in your head about what just happened inside the incredibly strange tower. That strange experience leads to today's theory. Yes, I said theory, not story, though most of what Molasses says in his document makes tons of sense and probably is the intended narrative. But whatever, I need to shut up and get on with this. Alright, so for those of you who beat Hollow Knight with the Dream No More ending, or either of the Godhome endings, you have seen a King's Mold. The armored void constructs that guard the outside of the White Palace. The Collector has a striking resemblance to an unarmored King's Mold, as well as the mold that is inside of the King's Workshop room in the White Palace. There are a few differences in the Collector, though. First, the Collector has some noticeable fingers and such adorning his body, and also, he has no armor. But with these similarities, it likely means that the Pale King did, in fact, create the Collector. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, it seems very likely that the Pale King did, in fact, create the Collector. And since the other molds have a purpose imbued into them, we will play off a very similar concept here, except the Collector would have different purposes. The Hunter's Journal says, preserves Hallownest's creatures in glass jars. This pretty much follows his Dreamnail dialogue, which states, my love, protected at last. A safe space for you, and you, and you. It must be saved. With these two quotes in mind, it isn't very difficult to find the purpose of this assumed mold. Now, with the fact that vessels have no thoughts, you may think a mold also would not have thoughts. But the King's Mold does have dialogue, being defend and kill, which are quite primitive, but we'll get to this primitivity later. Obviously, with words like what the Collector is saying, and the multitude of creatures from the far reaches of the Kingdom of Hallownest preserved in glass jars in the Tower of Love, it would make sense that the purpose assigned to our Collector would be protect, at least as a baseline assignment, with more advanced commands given later. This crazy construct could have done his orders perfectly, or completely in his own twisted way. We don't know which for sure. Here's now a quick part where I slightly disagree with what Mola put in the theory document. He suggests that this was likely a plan before the vessels, but given the intelligence and extra features on the King's Mold, it seemed as if the Pale King would have more experience. Also, locking creatures in jars seems like to be an action taken after some other methods have failed. After getting the order to protect the various bugs and such of Hallownest, and got to work on his own way of protecting the bugs of Hallownest as best he could by locking them in jars. and this might have worked, as some of the bugs he has in his tower are known to have base instinct, and the grubs did remain fine. But since the grub father in the Crossroads also seems to be fine, it might just be a highly resilient species. This could have been during some of the other experiments, though. It's quite possible that these were not just to keep them locked up to be safe, and that these were experiments to try and find a way to use the grub's resilience to help the kingdom. Back in the earlier days of the collector's work, there was another collector. This bug was, well, a bug who could live, breathe, and think. Here we are referring to the carcass in the Queen's Garden, holding the love key, which is the key that grants access to the Tower of Love. This bug is found, like mentioned, in the Queen's Garden, nestled at the end of a long hallways of sorts. There's a possibility he could have been here on a sort of business trip to the White Lady to give a sort of status update on his project. That's only a possibility. This bug most likely lived within the Tower of Love and ran the operations going on in the building. He had a crazy obsession over collecting the bugs of Hallownest, and apparently grubs. He decided to seal these away for reasons unknown. The collector is responsible for many of the things in the Tower of Love, including the ever-useful grub map, and quite likely the Vitruvian grub painting, one of the weirdest things in the game that, as of now, has very little lore explanation. Hopefully Silksong can explain this. We can assume this as no void construct or void being can write or draw, and it seems to fit the agenda of the original collector. This bug owned or at least used the Tower of Love, and he later turned his back on the void construct. Now we shall delve ever deeper into some of the lore of the collector and the void construct, also known as the collector. This will be complex. Don't forget, this part will be speculation. The bug the collector, who we'll call Philip from now on, was a bug born inside the wonderful kingdom of Hallownest. As a child, he watched the Pale King in parades and such and desperately wanted to be a royal retainer, or as you might know them, the pathetic things that you kill in the White Palace. As he got older, he caught a job with a corporation endorsed by the king himself. This was run by the enigmatic dreamer, Lurien the Watcher, the dreamer found in the Watcher Spire, who has shockingly little lore surrounding him throughout the game. Philip rose up through the ranks from a low-ranking employee to being one of Lurien's right-hand men, and trusted enough by the Pale King to run a project. This project was to capture bugs from across the kingdom of Hallownest, specifically grubs, and put them in the Tower of Love. Philip could have known why they were doing this, but I don't. Quickly, I'll go over some small theories of why the Pale King imprisoned the grubs and some other bugs from Hallownest. First off is how they're notably similar to the Radiants, as caterpillars do evolve into butterflies or moths, and the grubberfly's elegy charm is considered holy, just like our friend the Radiants. Could also be due to a natural resistance against the infection, as we see these creatures keep their sanity throughout the game. Could also just be that the Pale King wanted them to survive and populate the kingdom after its fall. Or it could be an evil ritual. I have no grounds to back that one up, but maybe, and it sounds fun, and it semi-explained the Vitruvian grub. Anyways, Lurien allowed Philip to use this abandoned building, the Tower of Love, as ground zero for his operation. Lurien supplied all the resources required and helped to transport glass jars to and from the Watcher's Spire. Here's another quick speculation on Lurien's naming. He could be the Watcher as he watched over the grubs and the operations of this project and made sure it worked. Kind of like a spectator. Lurien the Watcher. Philip's project became of so much importance to the king that the king created a helper to help and supervise Philip on his quest. This void being also could have just replaced the now eternally sleeping Lurien the Watcher. Also, the collector construct could have served for other very important unique purposes that we don't know about. That's a unique ability to avoid construct or void being. He also could have just been the minion in charge of placing the grubs and such around Hallownest. Throughout their time and adventures together, Philip started to become corrupted by the void of his friend, the void construct collector. And eventually, the collector almost entirely consumed Philip's will and such. The two became one, and Philip essentially was enslaved to the void being. Luckily, Philip escaped, to be murdered by a vicious warrior tribe embracing the infection. Now, we will talk about the shockingly high intelligence of the void construct collector. Natural void beings, such as the vessel you play in the game, have, in the words of the Pale King, no mind to think. The King's Mold do have a brain and a form of sentience, though as we know from discussing the Dreamnail dialogue of the King's Molds earlier. Like mentioned earlier, it is likely that the collector would have been made at the same workshop and of the same mold as all of the other King's Mold examples we have throughout the game. Now, I think two things about this incredibly high in intellect construct. A, I feel it could have been a later iteration of the King's Mold and thus would have had more features, the fingers, and a slightly higher intelligence. B, it probably gained some more intelligence via its long stay with Philip, who could have both taught the collector, and the collector likely stole some of Philip's mind and intelligence, hence gaining more intelligence. The collector gained more and more skills, likely even being able to imitate Philip's voice by the end, which would explain all the strange sounds we hear in the Tower of Love. The weird sounds the hunter hears is likely before the collector was trapped in the Tower of Love. It would have likely been the collector capturing or hiding the grubs. That should be a complete story about the collector and Philip, the original collector. These speculative events could be incredibly important in Hellenist history. If I missed anything, please tell me in the comment section. And also, please remember to subscribe so you can stay tuned for more Hollow Knight content. Have a nice day, guys. Ravenbane out.